Hello and welcome to Apocalypse Now, dispatches from a world on the brink, the Daily Mail's weekly global news podcast. I'm David Patrikarakos. I've spent the last 15 years covering foreign affairs and conflict in some of the world's most dangerous places. But even I have to ask, are we now staring into the abyss?
I know this has been a point of national media, but I think everybody around the world agrees that Iran was rushing towards a bomb.
Israel does not want to live with a country that we have with no borders with. We are not occupying their land. We never had a war with. Israel does not choose, from now on, refuses to live with such a regime sponsoring terror organizations who kill our civilians.
Most people do agree that there are basically sleeper cells or terrorists within other countries sent by Iran, if not funded, radicalized, everything, that could be activated in some type of big plan to destabilize multiple countries.
We all want regime change, David, right? This is the worst thing to happen in Iran in centuries, this regime.
Iran's death to America isn't an aspiration, it's a goal.
So Iran is not fighting for Palestinians because it wants justice for both people. No, the Iranian regime wants Israel dead, wants Israeli citizens dead. It denies the Holocaust.
Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. Well, the brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Old-fashioned hoses get kinks and creases at the spigot, but the Copperhead's Pocket Pivot swivels 360 degrees for full water flow and freedom to water with ease all around your home. When you're all done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size for effortless handling and tidy storage. Plus, your super light and ultra-durable Pocket Hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that? I'll tell you what, an exciting radio-exclusive offer just for you. For a limited time, you can get a free Pocket Pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just text WATER to 64,000. That's WATER to 64,000 for your 2 free gifts with purchase. WATER to 64,000.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Pocket Hose. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. Terms apply. Available at pockethose.com/terms.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping will discuss the situation in the Middle East in a phone call in the coming days, the Interfax news agency has said. Describing the ongoing war between Iran and Israel as a situation is a bit like calling the Somme a skirmish. Meanwhile, experts are lining up on both sides, shaking their head in dismay as they talk about an impending all-out war. But let's look at the missiles arcing above the city's skies. Let's look at the burnt-out buildings. War isn't coming. War is here. This week, I'm in Israel, where this morning I was woken up by an air raid siren, accompanied by a recorded Hebrew voice telling me to get to a shelter, quick. An hour later, I was dashing to a site in central Tel Aviv where I saw a tangle of destroyed residential buildings. One thing is clear, Israel may have mastery of Iran's skies. It may be deploying its air defenses effectively, but Iranian rockets are still getting through. This war has a long way to go. And if that wasn't bad enough, it seems this war may soon have some new belligerents. As former Swedish Prime Minister Carl Bildt has said, it looks like Trump is going to get involved. Bildt, who was also the country's long-standing foreign minister, made his comment on social media and posted a flight tracking image that showed a large US tanker aircraft being moved from the US to Europe. This as Trump skipped out of the G7 summit early, like he was about to miss a meal, as the Israeli ambassador to the US insisted that President Trump was not putting any pressure on his country to halt the fighting. For his part, Trump said on his social media platform Truth Social that he had not reached out to Iran for peace talks in any way, shape or form, adding that the country should have taken the deal that was on the table. which, to paraphrase David Bowie, is the kind of rhetoric that's akin to putting out fire with gasoline. But maybe that's just us. PM Keir Starmer has rejected the idea that Trump might want to directly involve the US in helping Israel attack Iran, saying that his discussions with the US president at the G7 summit made him convinced that Trump genuinely seeks peace. Strange what bedfellows a tariff deal can make, especially given that Trump's latest take on the situation was to warn Iran's supreme leader that he was, and I quote, an easy target, that he would not be killed, at least for now. Not that Iran or indeed Israel appeared to be listening, but the aforementioned ambassador was full of foreboding. When the dust settles, you're going to see some surprises on Thursday night and Friday that will make the beeper operation seem almost simple, he said. The beeper operation, for anyone who might have missed it, was where thousands of Hezbollah operatives' pagers exploded simultaneously, killing at least 10 and injuring many more. One of the most astonishing intelligence operations in history. It was a Trojan horse for the digital age. Happy weekend, everyone. But for now, rockets crash into both countries as both sides have targeted each other's oil and gas facilities, increasing the risk not only of further conflict, but of environmental disaster. As explosions were reported earlier in the week near oil refineries in southern Tehran, Iran carried out retaliatory strikes, focusing on the most populated areas between Tel Aviv and the port of Haifa. And round we go, in ever-decreasing circles, worn down by time. In a moment, we'll speak to Meir Javedanfar, Iranian-Israeli Middle East analyst and co-author of The Nuclear Sphinx of Tehran. But first, let's turn to John Spencer, former major in the US Army and chair of urban warfare studies, to discuss just what is happening on the ground as these two sides battle it out, and to consider just how real the threat of nuclear war really is. John, welcome. Let's have a think about how we got here. In March of this year, Tulsi Gabbard, the US Director of National Intelligence, handpicked by the president, stated that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. On Tuesday, Trump swatted that information aside, saying, I don't care what she said, I think they're very close to having one. So which is it? Intel agency or Trump's instinct?
Well, David, I don't do politics. I do war, which is politics by other means. I'll say that from the U.S. military, we've had multiple Armed Service Committee testimonies from like the commander of Strategic Command and General Kane, four-star general, saying, no, intelligence says that Israel is within a week, 3 weeks. The morning before Israel's attack, the IAEA said that Iran, for the first time, or the first time they've said it in 20 years, is in violation of non-nuclear proliferation, is developing nuclear capabilities, as in doing that enrichment beyond what it's allowed to do. So I think the reporting and the intelligence is overwhelming that in the side of President Trump's analysis that he's getting from the intelligence briefings. I know this has been a point of national media, but I think everybody around the world agrees that Iran was rushing towards a bomb, was in violation of enrichment. Just from the sites that it's building, these aren't clean energy, production sites. These are nuclear enrichment sites.
Can you give us an assessment, John? And there really is, and I'm not just being polite here, no one better to do this than you at the moment. Your work is really outstanding. An assessment of what has happened militarily here. It was an extraordinary strike by the Israelis, not only on the facilities, but decapitating so much of Iran's military control and command, no?
Absolutely. I mean, it's as somebody who writes writes not necessarily history, but I definitely write a lot about war. It's really hard to keep up with how many times Israel is writing a new rule book for the way of modern war. Israel's opening of this operation, Rising Lion, wasn't an airstrike. It was a joint multi-domain operation. The word almost escapes me. On the opening night, 5 waves of multi-domain strikes that included cyber operations, deception operations, deep intelligence penetration, and the actual strike. The Mossad, just the deep intelligence infiltration, really what they did, rewrote the rules, redefined what we call shock and awe, even from American military operations. They were able to infiltrate so deep into Iranian military and political structures that they sent a text to almost the complete Iranian Air Force command, had 19 of the entire Iranian Air Force having a meeting, that it was a Mossad notification to have a meeting about Israel, and then struck them all. And just in the opening waves, they killed 20 senior Iranian generals. So the head of the IRGC, the head of Quds Force, the head of the missile program, on and on and on. They killed 9 nuclear scientists. So all of that in the opening minutes. Then they took down any ability for Iran to do a massive retaliation. So much like what Ukraine did to Russia in Operation Spider's Web, Israel had used intelligence agents to build drones inside of Iran and move those drone launching trucks or whatever close to Iranian radar, ballistic missile, and other sites to allow for these advanced Israel fighters, American F-35Is, to have a corridor. So they achieved air supremacy by creating these corridors for the jets to come in to do these massive precision strikes. And then they continued to hit things that were psychologically impactful. So not only does, texting generals to have meetings ripple across the Iranian military infrastructure, but it also broke. This operation was a psychological operation because it penetrated the idea of Iranian invincibility, especially even their most valued sites like the nuclear sites. So they hit Natanz on the first opening wave. They hit Istiklal. I mean, all Fordo got hit later. They really penetrated Iran's ideals of invincibility. The word really is hard to say, but the operation has continued. We're in the 7th day as we're talking, so they've hit, all 200 ballistic missile trucks, because Iran has a kind of a mobile ballistic missile program. 200 trucks. They've penetrated Iran's ability to have, which is really, we'll talk about nuclear program we did, but we didn't talk about the ballistic program, because those are really the 2 biggest investments for the nation of Iran, or the IRGC, is both the nuclear program and the ballistic missile program. 2 weeks before this operation, Iran had tested the biggest ballistic missile they've ever tested, a 2-ton explosion. And just put that in comparison, Hiroshima was 15-ton. While it's not nuclear, that's still a weapon of mass destruction that would have, if it would get off into Israel, would cause a massive explosion. And then there's also the United States sanctioned Iran about 2 months ago because there were precursors that China and other people, industries were trying to send to Iran to build an intercontinental ballistic missile to reach Europe and America, because Iran's death to America isn't an aspiration, it's a goal.
The IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, this is a serious outfit. These are people of skill, and the degree to which Israel has penetrated them is extraordinary. Who would be an Iranian military commander now, John? The paranoia must be everywhere.
Well, they keep killing them. So much like they did in Hezbollah, once Israel completes really killing the entire wire diagram chart of the IRGC, or even the chief of staff of the entire Iranian military, which they killed on night 1, the new guy who got appointed got killed 4 days later. So if it's not a good day to say you're in charge of anything in the Iranian, especially IRGC, but even in the Iranian military.
So maybe, John, they're not paranoid. Maybe, in fact, it is all justified.
Absolutely. It's paralysis, David. This is what is called paralysis. The highest form of warfare, of course, is winning without fighting. And the next one is the cognitive, right? Where you paralyze the enemy and try to get to the political goal, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Like, what is the goal here?
Yeah, I mean, this all has to move towards some kind of a political goal, but we're not there yet. And let's talk about Iran now. Israel, we've talked about their strikes. Now, on Wednesday, Ali Bahraini, the Iranian ambassador to the UN, said that Iran will, and I quote, respond strongly, and we will stop aggression from any side, be it Israel or the United States. Bold words there, John. What, behind the rhetoric, Khamenei's endless tweeting and boasting and threatening, can Iran actually do?
I mean, Iran is a dangerous nation for sure. I mean, its investments in this ballistic missile program, not only what could it do to Israel. We can talk about what it has done so far, but it has threatened U.S. installations, at which it can range from Iran, and who knows what it might decide in an irrational act. Hopefully, they stay within the framework of a rational act. So far, again, and why the opening campaign was so devastating is that Israel hit Iran's ability to respond. I mean, most people knew that Iran had over 2,000 ballistic missiles, had hundreds of mobile ballistic missile launching trucks. But Israel really put a hurting on that to where they could only launch about 100, if not 200 ballistic missiles, which is still a lot, which still is able to overwhelm Israel's air defense suite, right? Some people call it the Iron Dome, but it's, Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow 3. You have an American THAAD, Patriot. You have now you have up almost 3 aircraft strike groups in the Mediterranean in support of defending Israel. But so far, Iran has launched 400, as of the time we're talking, 400 ballistic missiles. About 10% of those have impacted in Israel. As of this morning, they hit a hospital. So their targets have been mostly civilian, although there have been targeting military. Sometimes they miss and hit a civilian apartment complex. They've also launched 1,000 drones. As if you've been covering Ukraine, you know that Iran has an abundance of the capability to build these really cheap but devastating suicide drones. One way they hit their target, over 100 pounds of explosive. They've sent 1,000 of those at Israel, and not one of them have breached the border. You have even other countries like Jordan knocking them out of Jordanian airspace. So they're still a dangerous nation, although this small nation of Israel attacking this giant is historic, and what they've been able to do, not through having more equipment, right? It's what Israel did in using its equipment in a certain way, smarter and synchronized, that was able to achieve such an impactful effect. But Iran has, of course, retaliated and gotten some things done. There's, as of now, I think over 25 Israelis that have been killed and over 500 that have been wounded. But from what we do in military combat, a power analysis, Iranian kind of invincibility, its strength has been punctured. What it can even do, not just defending itself, and I highly recommend people not invest in Russian air defense systems because clearly they're not that effective. And Israel took out 50% of their S-300s in the last rounds when Iran attacked in April of 2024 and in October. But now, kind of just stop buying Russian air defense systems if I were any country. But yeah, their response has not been what most people thought it would be.
So Israel has mastery of the Iranian skies. Israel is deploying its air defenses highly effectively, but stuff is still getting through. We talk about Iranian capabilities being degraded. We talk about the cognitive wins for Israel. As things get worse for the Iranians, which they are likely to do as Israel has unfettered control of their skies, what do you think, John? What is your assessment, as a military man, a full military man, of Iran's potential to do something asymmetric or extreme?
Yeah, that's the big concern, even in the United States and other places. Is I think most of your listeners are probably informed that Iran doesn't have much of a military. It invested heavily in the IRGC, whose mission is the survival of the regime. And then within the IRGC, of course, is Quds Force. And if you ever served in Iraq and Afghanistan, these are the forces like General Soleimani that President Trump eliminated, whose responsibility was to build this global exporting of terrorism, to include the ring of fire around Israel, the proxies, right? So you have Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, the Shia-backed groups in Iraq. There is that concern of those being activated, but thanks to, again, Israel's operations over the last 20 plus months, all the crown jewels of this Iranian terror octopus have been at least defanged, but they're still dangerous. So there's always been this concern of activating all of that against Israel. But then a lot of countries are also concerned about, of course, we know that Iran had a plot to assassinate President Trump. And I saw a debate recently with Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz saying that that's not true. But okay, most people do agree that there are basically sleeper cells or terrorists within other countries sent by Iran, if not funded, radicalized, everything, that could be activated in some type of big plan to destabilize multiple countries. So you have a lot of countries worrying about that right now. And I don't say that it's not a concern. but it is absolutely potential of Iranians' strategy is to try to create these homegrown terrorist plots using even Iranian agents. I mean, there have been plenty, even in Israel, double agents, plenty of Israelis, double agents spying for Iran, if not plotting to do operations in Israel.
Before I move on to the next topic, I actually want to ask you something, John, that I've been wondering about for a while. And I know some of our listeners have as well. We look at Iran's proxies. We have the Houthis in Yemen. We have Hamas in Gaza. We have Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah, Hamas completely taken out or degraded, at least by the Israelis. Iran's client collapsed as a result of the pager operation and other things. But one thing we're not talking about and don't seem to be involved are Iraq's Shia militias, a classic Iranian proxy. Why have the Israelis not gone after them, John? And why have they stayed out of all of this?
Well, we've seen them a little bit during the beginning of after October 7th, attacking American. I mean, there was an attack on an American base in Jordan. We've seen a little bit of their activity, very low level, from Kataib, Hezbollah, and other forces that I fought in Iraq. I can't say. I mean, the death of General, the old Quds Force commander, and it did cause a massive impact on that exporting, especially with the Iraq. And I've heard people say that, because of the Iraq invasion, now Iraq is a Iranian proxy. Like, if you don't understand Iraq's political situation between the Shia, the Sunni, you have ISIS, I just think that those Shia-backed militias aren't as powerful as people think they were, capabilities. Like Houthis, of course, were armed by Iran with like the greatest pirate terrorist group that's ever lived, with a certain shore to sea capability. It's incredible. And they still get off one or two missiles every other day or something. But I don't think Iran backed and funded and was able to, thanks to Iraq and other countries, was able to arm them to the point where they could do something big, right? So they have like a drone capability, and they have the ability to do like Fahedin attacks and things like that. We've seen very low level activity of that. So maybe they don't have the fangs of Hezbollah, because Hezbollah was the crown jewel, just to be clear, of this Iranian proxy. And I mean, the over 100,000 missiles, some being precision guided, most of them short range missiles, but it was a real threat. And I visited Israel multiple times since October 7th. It was the biggest concern, not just the fighters that could come over the border, but those 100,000. So once Israel took that out and took out the Nasrallah, who even beyond Israel's thoughts was such a key part of the Iranian strategy, it did ripple and it did create this vulnerability. And we saw Assad fall because of this vulnerability as well. So you had forces in Syria that could have been a part of this Iranian kind of counterattack towards Israel. And all of that's been dismantled, if not fractured, over the last 20 months.
Donald Trump has hinted that he might get involved. Personally, for what it's worth, I already see him on Twitter deploying the plural pronoun, John. We did this, we did that. I think that if the mullahs are going to fall, I can see Donald Trump getting involved just to claim the credit. Beyond this, only the Americans, only you, John, have the bunker busting technology that can actually take out Fordo. Israelis have struck a lot of above ground installations. Do you see America getting involved? And if they do, what are they likely to do? What form is this intervention most likely to take?
So this is the part I always hate to do, is trying to predict the future. I from everything that I've read, it looks like they're readying capabilities. So the fact that they've sent the 3rd aircraft carrier strike group, the Carl Vincent, to the Mediterranean is an immense capability enhancement to prepare to do operations. But you're right. If the goal, which I think the goal is, although we talk a lot about regime change, which would be great for the Iranian people, the goal remains limited in the destruction of the nuclear program, which would really require a political solution of them agreeing to stop. So at first they talked about rolling back to the program, and Israel has clearly done that so far, rolled it back a certain number of years, but that doesn't mean they can't restart it and dig it out. And yes, I believe of the options that the president is looking at, personally, President Trump is looking at what could the United States do to help get to that political goal. Although this pressure keeps intensifying on the Ayatollah to at this point, you should probably come back to the negotiation table and give up the program. And it worked in in the past, right? So despite the weapons of mass destruction search that I did in Iraq, Israel's attack of the Iraq nuclear site did lead to the inspections and everything that kept the nuclear program from restarting. The United States has one of the quickest solutions to most of the nuclear remaining sites, right? So the massive ordnance penetrator, the GBU-57 that we all talk about, only the United States has it. It's a 30,000 pound bunker busting munition that can penetrate 200 feet into the ground, into concrete reinforced steel. It can only be deployed by a B-2 bomber, an American aircraft. So this is a really one solution, but only an American bomb, American plane can deliver it. But it would be very quick to get to the goal. And that's always the goal in wars, to get to the goal quickly. And in this case, it's a limited goal. So I think that's the strongest option that the United States could be involved in a very near future, is to do these strikes against Bordeaux. And possibly, we just don't know what the status of Isfahan and Natanz are on what is the status of those sites. But if you really want to destroy the program, but I also want to highlight that in last year, Israel did an operation into Syria, into a deep buried missile site that would have been really hard to hit with missiles. And they called the Operation Many Ways. They put 100 special forces on the ground to enter the site and put explosives inside of it to blow it up from within. There are actually many ways you can get to a deep buried site. Of course, this bunker buster would be a really effective, low risk to the forces involved, because if you do a deep raid, you're putting a lot of aircraft and soldiers at risk. And we learned this for trying to save the Iranian hostages during Operation Iron Claw. Puts a lot of risk. So I think that's one of the strongest options. But the worst of the options is if the Ayatollah miscalculated, and all this rhetoric he's talking about, he says he's going to strike a U.S. because they're responsible for helping Iran. That's the worst case scenario, not just for Iran. That would be a fatal mistake for the regime. That would lead to the end of the regime, because the American response to a single missile against a U.S. personnel dying or even a site being hit the American Air Force is the greatest on the earth. It would do really bad damage to the regime. That's one of the worst case scenarios, but it's the worst case scenario for the world, just because of the impact on the Straits of Hormuz and the oil exports and the price of oil and all that. I think that we're trying to avoid that as much as possible, but the enemy always gets a vote.
Okay, as we come to the end, John, I think we should think about possible end games in Iran. I think the Israelis want regime change. What are your thoughts as a military man as well? Tactically, what is the way that you can see this playing out?
This is a very vibrant Persian multicultural society of 90 million people that the major investment that the Ayatollahs and the mullahs have made isn't in the military capabilities. It's in the subjugation of the population. And that's the goal of the IRGC, is the survival of the regime. So how this plays out, of course, I think this is the greatest opportunity for the Iranian people to break free of this Islamic regime and the subjugation of the people. And what we saw during the Women Life Freedom Masha Amini protest was an amazing sign. And you already have Israel using cyber warfare to air the Women Life Freedom protest on Iranian TVs, which goes to that sentiment that most people would love to see a regime change. As a military analyst, of course, as a strategist, you think, okay, who comes after? Nobody has that direct solution. And there's opposition groups in Iran that have been severely impacted because of the IRGC finds out about those. And it's a really nasty business, but it has to be the choice of the Iranian people. But this is the greatest opportunity, clearly. And Israel has started hitting police chiefs, the Basij leaders, things like that would prevent a popular uprising, which is what I think most people on the outside would say that's the way, if this happens, it has to happen, because picking who comes next and all that stuff is very bad history of doing that.
Yeah, we've been here before and it did not work out well. John, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, and I look forward to following and enjoying your work in the future.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, John Spencer, former major in the US Army and chair of urban warfare studies. Still to come, we'll be speaking to Meir Javedanfar, Iranian-Israeli Middle East analyst and co-author of The Nuclear Sphinx of Tehran. Stay with us.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Welcome back to Apocalypse Now, dispatches from a world on the brink. We're still talking about the Iran-Israel war, and I'm joined now by Meir Javedanfar, Iranian-Israeli Middle East analyst and co-author of The Nuclear Sphinx of Tehran. Meir, welcome. So Meir, the Iran-Israel war has finally begun. How did we get here?
If you want to go back in history, it starts in 1991, around the Madrid peace talks, when the Islamic Republic of Iran, in order to torpedo the Madrid peace talks, invites all groups that reject peace with Israel and wants its annihilation. That's when it officially started. That's when the Islamic Republic of Iran officially declared proxy war against the state of Israel in an organized manner. This came after 8 years of Israel, around 7 or 8 years, selling weapons to Iran during the Iran-Iraq war in order to develop some kind of a rapprochement with the Iranians. Instead, what we got was a declaration of proxy war. And since then, the Iranian regime killed and maimed thousands of Israelis through its proxies prior to October 7th. After October 7th, we saw at least 1,000 dead Israelis. Ayatollah Khamenei supported Hamas before this operation. 2 days after the operation took place, in a public statement, while saying Iran was not involved, he said that the hands and the forehead of its planners must be kissed.
Oh, wow.
And then Iran publicly identified with Hamas. And this is just a continuation. Then they brought forces into Syria. Then they tried to create a ring of fire around Israel. And this is the continuation of that war. But for the first time, it's Israel that took the initiative. Iran took the initiative in 1991 and carried on with it until today with its proxy war. Israel on the 13th of June 2025 took the initiative by launching a conventional war against the Islamic Republic of Iran.
So why now? Iran has been a threat to the state of Israel, as you say, for 30 years. Why did Israel finally choose to strike now?
I think there are various reasons, David, but I think chief among them was the concerns regarding Iran's nuclear program, that the Iranians they've doubled the amount of enriched uranium at 60%. To make a nuclear weapon, you need a 90%. In order to make a nuclear weapon, so they have 60% and they doubled the quantity to 400 kilograms. You put that next to the IAEA resolution on the day before the war, saying Iran is not cooperating with the inspectors of the IAEA, and concerns in Israel, intelligence reports in Israel that Iran is already using some of its enriched uranium towards a program to make a nuclear bomb, then I think this is why the decision was made. But there are also other reasons why we went into this war, which if you want, I can later on elaborate.
I think we can trace a direct line from today to October 7th. The axis of resistance, the Iranian-backed proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, even the Houthis, they believed October the 7th would recalibrate the Middle East in favor of them, it seems that it recalibrated it in favor of Israel, because Israel went on to decapitate Hezbollah, to smash Hamas, and through the fall of Hezbollah, Assad fell too. The ring of fire, as you so accurately put it, that once existed around Israel is now degraded. And now the Israelis decided to strike.
That's another reason, David. That's another reason. I think ultimately there's the nuclear case. I mean, the case for causing serious damage to Iran's nuclear program, which justified the war. But there's another case. As I said in the beginning of our conversation, Israel does not want to live with a country that we have with no borders with. We are not occupying their land. We never had a war with. Israel does not, from now on, refuses to live with such a regime sponsoring terror organizations who kill our civilians. The Iranian regime is one of the biggest reasons why there's no peace in the Middle East. Everybody says it's the settlements. But you know what really killed Oslo? The bus bombings. The cafes, all paid for by Iran. Israel was evacuating occupied territory. And it was these bus bombings that made it physically dangerous for Israel to withdraw from those occupied territories. And of course, it brought Netanyahu to power, which then, replaced the Labour government who was pro-peace. So Iran is not fighting for Palestinians because it wants justice for both people. No, the Iranian regime wants Israel dead, wants Israeli citizens dead. It denies the Holocaust. It is so depraved that it has Holocaust cartoon competitions, David. There have been 3 so far. 3 Holocaust cartoon competitions in Iran. And the last one, Khamenei called to congratulate its organizers. This is unjustified, and I think no Israeli government is willing to live with this anymore.
Iran is a serious military player. Its IRGC, its Revolutionary Guard, is a serious outfit. How was Israel clearly able to penetrate it so effectively?
David, if you have the intention of doing something, then you will get there. That intention is amplified many times when you are living in a country that includes many children of survivors of Holocaust. And the enemy you're trying to overcome is one that calls for your elimination. I think that creates a lot of motivation for Israelis to do our best to fight this enemy, and I think this is what Israel does best. For us, special operations is to Israel what watches are to Switzerland. This is our expertise. We've had to hone it because of our history, but yes, it was a spectacular operation. I think on the 13th of June, the Islamic Republic faced an earthquake and a volcano eruption on the same day. On the same day, they didn't know what was happening. But now they are, they're trying to recuperate. And this morning they fired missiles at civilian targets, buildings in Ramat Gan, just outside of Tel Aviv, a hospital, Soroka. We have many dead people. The Iranian regime is still continuing to target Israelis.
I've seen the footage of Israeli commandos operating on the ground in Iran. Now, I'm not sure how many of that are Israeli. I think they're dealing with a lot of local Iranians, perhaps in opposition groups. But something strikes me. I don't think Israel, even with all its brilliance, would have had that much freedom of movement even 10 years ago. I think, is it not, Meir? This is a sign of how much people inside Iran as well are sick and tired of these brutal, corrupt and murderous regime.
I tell you what it is also a sign of. Yes, I mean, Iranian people in dictatorial regimes, which when they look upon their leaders as taking them to forever wars, which serves no purpose for them. Iranians are not Zionists, but the Iranians hate the regime taking them into a forever war against Israel, which only brings upon them misery and sanctions and now war. But I think there's another fatal mistake made by Mr. Khamenei. I think he's repeating the mistakes of Putin. Both Putin and Khamenei believe that the countries they are attacking are populated by people who don't belong there, and that the local population feel they don't belong where they live, because the country they live is an artificial state, and therefore they are unwilling to fight. And I think this is a mistake that Putin made when he attacked Ukraine. Ukrainians, it turns out, don't believe that they are citizens of an artificial state, even though Mr. Putin may believe so, and that they feel they belong to that state. The same to Israelis. We belong to this land. And so do Palestinians, by the way. So do Palestinians. After this miserable war in Gaza, we have to work out a way to live next to each other again. And, but Khamenei believes that Jews have no place in this part of the world, that the only people who have the right to have self-determination in the Middle East are Muslims, not Jews. And he believes that we live in an artificial country, that we don't think we belong here, therefore we're not willing to fight. And it turns out that he's wrong. And another thing, David, I see in some of the Persian language articles, they keep quoting the Quran, saying that the Jews are the most cowardly people. I can send you the article in Farsi. It was published recently in the IRGC newspaper Javan. It keeps citing the Quran and the historical narratives, it says, and sociological studies that show the Jews are the cowardliest people in the world. And this is, I think, genuinely they believe. It says that Jews are scared of direct confrontation. And it brings some distorted, made-up stories from the Quran, which I'm not sure even they are in the Quran, but they genuinely believe that. And I think that they have realized they have made a mistake. And to be honest, David, I think Israel should have deterred Iran a long time ago. We left it too late. But we are where we are.
I was at the crash site today, Meir, in Ramat Gan. I saw the destruction of residential buildings, the shattered glass, the imploded buildings. Israel has mastery of the Iranian skies. Israel is deploying its air defenses extremely effectively, but clearly missiles are still coming through. Do you see this as being a long, drawn-out war now?
It could be. Depends on what kind of a price the regime pays, how the regime can be deterred. Will killing Khamenei stop it? Maybe, maybe not. I really don't know. But the regime doesn't seem to care about the cost for the people of Iran. And I hope that they don't have some kind of a new hypersonic missile that we did not know about, or that our missile systems cannot shoot down, because that's going to be terrible news for us. And as you see, they target civilian areas. I think the Islamic Republic is under serious pressure. You cannot escape the irony. For 46 years in Israel, there has never been a single flight to Iran. Since June 13th, there are only flights to Iran from Israel. Nowhere else. By the Israeli Air Force, they fly over Syrian territory, which might as well be Israeli territory these days. The Syrians, after the Iranian regime sided with Bashar al-Assad to kill 500,000 of their people, they are very happy just to, let our aircraft pass. They wave us, wish Israel the best of luck, because what the Iranian regime did to the Syrian people. They fly over Iraq, they go inside Iran. From a conversation with an Israeli pilot, Iranian pilots are not confronting them. When they take off from the airports, they go to central Iran. They don't confront the Israeli pilots, and which is very sensible. The last aircraft Iran bought was in 1992. They're going to fight with technology from 2025. They're just not doing it. So we have the control of the skies. That's true, David. But this is a nasty regime. This is a very nasty regime. And there could be unexpected scenarios as well. This may go to places we don't want. For example, if I can just add this point, I don't know if it's in your question. We all want regime change, David, right? This is the worst thing to happen in Iran in centuries, this regime. But even if you overthrow the regime, which inshallah will happen soon, it has 20% of the population support. So that's what? 20%, 1/5 of 80 million is about 18 million. Okay? 18 million. Let's just say 10% of those are willing to fight. That's 1.8 million people. These people, after the regime is overthrown, they could go into hiding, they could go into southern Iraq, and then they could carry out assassinations, car bombings, shootings. They could create a new, a Shia Al-Qaeda to fight the new government in Iran. This is a very nasty regime. So there are many unknowns and unexpected scenarios here. But I think what Israel should at the very least strive for are two things. Number one, for Iran to sign the nuclear agreement with Trump to dismantle its enrichment. And number two, for Iran to change its policies towards Israel. We don't expect them to have an embassy here or to fly to Tel Aviv, okay? Just change your policies, end your support for terror groups, transfer of missiles. I think those are things we could strive for.
How realistic is that? After all, we both know that a raison d'etre of the Islamic Republic is to resist the big and little Satans.
During the Iran-Iraq war, Iraq invaded Iran. That was a very unjustified war started by Iraq. But in 1982, Saddam Hussein realized he can't beat Iran. So he came to Iran with a peace agreement. And we in Iran did not know about this. The Iranian public did not know about this, found this out later. Saddam Hussein came with an offer of ceasefire, and the Saudis were willing to compensate Iran. Figures range from 20 billion to 50 billion. And Khomeini said, no, he's going to continue with the war until Saddam is overthrown. It took 6 years of bloodletting, many young Iranian people dying on the battlefront, Iranian cities being battered, till Khomeini at the end decided that he cannot win. And at the end, he decided to accept the ceasefire, which was likened to a chalice, drinking from a chalice of poison. The Iranian regime does weigh its costs. And, so therefore, I think it is possible. Yes, I think it is possible.
There seems to be no Khomeini for the opposition in Iran. Can regime succeed without an opposition, without a leader to rally around and to replace the mullahs?
David, after the experiences of Libya post-Gaddafi, after experiences of Iraq post-Saddam Hussein, as much as I detest the regime in Iran, maybe a weakened Iranian regime is better than anarchy there. We also have to take that into consideration. Look, the Bashar al-Assad, it took 10 years of bloodletting, okay? And in the chaos, we saw what happened. In Iraq, we saw what happened. We also have to look at history, even though the lessons of history may not be to our liking and may not match our goals. The regime falling in Iran could also lead to chaos, terrorism, and this is a very, very important topic that I think scenario that we have to take into consideration. That perhaps a weakened Iranian regime, we all like Prince Reza Pahlavi. All minorities in this region like monarchies, because monarchies like to have the legitimacy of the people. They have relations with all the tribes and all the groups of minorities and majority. Republics in this region are a disaster for minorities because they usually is formed by one class of society, usually the military. They come to power, and then they basically try to oppress the rest of the society. We love the Shah. My family, Iranian Jews, we are 99.9% monarchists. But does Prince Reza Pahlavi have the support? I don't know. There's not a single genuine survey that's done. Nothing. I don't know. Maybe it could be. For all we know, it could be also. But there is no survey. There is no valid source of information. So, we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful with what we're doing with regarding to regime change. And at the end of the day, and I'll end with this, Israel can facilitate regime change, but it can only happen once millions pour onto the streets in Iran, and there's no sign of that.
Mayor, my final question, as an Iranian, born in Tehran, bar mitzvahed in Tehran, if this regime is about to fall, do you think it could do something really extreme?
We have to take that possibility into consideration because Ayatollah Khamenei, you don't know what he's going to do. Some people say he's a messianic, then he might want to go out in a ball of fire. Or maybe he won't. Maybe he will just leave. I don't know. But we have to take all consideration, all possibilities, all scenarios into consideration.
Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to both my guests, Meir Javedanfar, Iranian Israeli Middle East analyst and co-author of The Nuclear Sphinx of Tehran, and John Spencer, former major in the US Army and chair of Urban Warfare Studies. Join me, David Patrikarakos, next time as we continue to bring you dispatches from a world on the brink. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at Apocalypse Now Pod, and you can get in touch via email at apocalypsenowpod@dailymail.com. We will see you again next week as we ask once more, Apocalypse Now.
Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.